All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Simply Cyber Live, the Thursday long form session where we get 45 minutes to an hour with industry professionals to share their perspective, their experiences, and really just benefit the group in general. It's basically like coffee talk for cyber professionals, and I'm absolutely super pumped about today. As you saw from the promo card coming in here, we are going to be joined by Ryan Leirvik, CEO of Nuevik, who's also got just an amazing career experience. He was at Grimm for a while, which many of us know, Bryson Bort's company, and he worked at the Pentagon and McKinsey, which I haven't had a chance to talk to Ryan about that, but McKinsey's got this whole mystique to it that I would definitely like to penetrate that veil and get a little bit behind the scenes. But standard practices, guys, if you have any questions, this is an absolute total engagement show. So Q&A, I will bring questions in. I'll take them out. Ryan will answer them. Today, he's going to be sharing how to understand and manage cyber risk. This is basically, if you are a GRC person, get ready to get all up in it. It's going to be like a gravy train of GRC content, really from a chief information security officer perspective. I'm sure we're going to be talking about Ryan's book, which basically lays out a blueprint on how to practically implement, understand, measure, and report on cybersecurity. So there is going to be an absolute avalanche of information coming at you. So sit back, relax. This will be available on replay as usual. So don't sweat it if you miss something. We're going to have a good time. Let's go get Ryan. Hold on, where's Ryan? Oh, I'm all full screen. There we are. Let's get rid of that. Let's do this. What's up, Ryan? How are you, man?
Good, Jerry. Good to see you, man. How are things with you?
Oh, awesome. I'm just all amped up, all energy all the time. I see that you're at RSA there. Like for a guest, you probably have the most exciting like background of any Simply Cyber Live guest we've had. How is RSA?
Good. It's the same. I'm probably a challenging person to ask because I always look for I'm a fundamentalist, right? So I always look for the practicality side. So I'm always looking for that area of like, all right, what are you actually doing? How is this actually, solving the problem? And there's a lot of that here, which is great. And then there's the fun, commercial side of it too. So it's good. Yeah. It's also good to see people again, right? It's kind of nice to be back plugged into like some of the ideas and some of the thinking that's going on, and actually like being able to see people again as we sort of like, get back to what we would normally consider as normal. So
normal,
yeah,
right? So is RSA your first kind of big post-pandemic conference?
No, well, big. This one has a scale of its own size, right? So
Right.
I think SmooCon was probably the first sort of back. We were at DEF CON last year, right? So that had a good following as well. So it feels maybe it's been almost a full cycle. So by the time August rolls around and DEF CON rolls around this year, it'll probably be a good full cycle of what would be normal again. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I'll probably run into you in Vegas. I've never been to RSA, but I know you're a vendor also, but I always felt like RSA gets the stigma, one that I propagate too, that it's more for it's like vendor on vendor action out there.
Yeah, there's like this distinction between, are we marketing to the problem or are we solving the problem, right? And there's some gray area in between, but largely two different camps. Yeah, it's look, there's nothing that commercialism can't, make worse, but, it also is helpful for a lot of organizations. We personally don't, professionally don't, market in this fashion, but what it is really good for is, sort of seeing some of the ideas, right? It's sort of on the fringe, like the innovation ideas are sort of on the fringe here where other cons are, right in the center coming out. So you got to kind of go on the edge of RSA together, but yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to see you at the conferences. I've been to a couple since the post-pandemic kind of status, and it really is good to connect and just, it's not all about the product. It is about engagement and those kind of organic conversations and seeing people and catching up and stuff like that. So absolutely love it for you. So I want, when we talked about you coming on the show many moons ago, because we've had to reschedule a few times, we were talking about your book, really, Understanding and Managing Cyber Risk. Now, I'm going to bring it up on stream because I want to focus on it, and then we can pivot, around as necessary. But here's Ryan's book. Now, guys, I've pinned a chat in the YouTube comments. Ryan wrote this book. It's actually very, very practical. If like, not to like toot Ryan's horn here, but like if you look at the way it's laid out, I'm always a huge fan of looking at the table of contents before anything else because I really feel like it informs on what we're actually doing here. And if you look at this, guys, the way he's laid it out, it's just nice. It states the problem, gets it all laid up in advance before you try to solve it, right? So it doesn't make any assumptions about like what what the challenges are of understanding and managing cyber risk. And then he lays out the solution, which is so brilliant, right? Understand the problem, manage the problem, and then get right up into measuring the problem, which is one of the most difficult things that I would say CISOs and practitioners do. When you wrote this book, did you find that the metrics part was kind of the most challenging to deliver practical information on?
Yeah, first, Jerry, thanks for that. That was wildly flattering. So I really appreciate you going to that because it's always
Oh,
nervous when
yeah.
you're putting something out. It's like, all right, how is this actually going to be received? So thank you very much for that. That's
Yeah.
wildly. I love the compliment. To answer your question, yeah, the measurements. Okay, so here's the deal with measurements, right? It's the piece I think that has been lost in the conversation since we love talking about measures, right? What you measure matters, right? We can measure anything, right? I can measure how many water bottles are on the floor. Like to me, in this current matter, that doesn't matter. But what matters is what we're measuring, right? So yes, measures are a challenge, but what's almost more important, measures actually become simpler, right? When you start to focus on, well, what problem are we solving for? Like what are we trying to measure, right? Okay,
Hmm.
X. Okay, well, how do we have that under management? Okay, Y. Okay, great. Now let's see how we're doing. And not talking, performance measures because that's part of them, right? But the major piece is like, do we have measures that tell me how we're managing it? Because you get what you inspect, not what you expect, right? And so if you
Hmm.
know what you're inspecting, then the measures become easier. So that's sort of the construct. But the even longer answer is, yeah, measures are really hard because you've got to get to the space of like, what problem are we solving for, right? To then think about, all right, how are we going to measure it and why are we measuring it? Are we measuring it for information? Like how many DDoS attacks we have? Okay, great, fun. You know,
Hmm.
how is that actionable, right? Well, it's not unless your load balancers are messed up or like some network issue that you're having relative to it. But largely, it's just informative. The hard spot, Jerry, is getting into the mental space of like, all right, what's a super easy way to put a little bit of math, right, behind the problem, behind the, an answer to the problem we're trying to solve for that is actionable, right, and measurable over time. And that to me is the hard part with measures. And if we get into that mind space, then at least the problem is more solved, right, and more descriptive of what we're trying to achieve. That then makes the measures easier. Yeah.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. So, and I don't know if you know this, but like, so I've built infosec programs and fixed infosec programs and managed infosec programs, and
Yeah.
that's why I know that metrics are such a pain. Um,
Yeah.
do you find, or have you found that typically when you build and mature a cyber program, you put in stuff in place and then you start maturing it. You go from like, kind of ad hoc to in place and then optimize. And metrics always seem to be at the tail end of any optimization growth program. Are you of the, and this is a philosophical thing for those watching, right? There's a philosophical position I want to know Ryan's stance on. Are you an advocate of measuring intermittently or saving it as part of that kind of optimized program, attribute?
Oh, great question. I'm going to go with I'm an OODA loop kind of guy to steal from our friends in the Air Force, right?
Uh-huh.
It's that constant iteration of measuring, of, sort of the adaptive approach, right? What are we trying to do? How are we getting there? How do we know we're getting back that feedback measure back in? That's the part that where philosophically I land in, because what happens is there's a lot of time between the time you implement or construct the concept of something, the architecture, then put it in place, then get it to actually work, then get to a place where you're measuring it and then try to optimize that. You've got that sort of time delay. And without that feedback mechanism throughout the place, you're sort of lost, right? Or you can be, let's put it that way. So
Hmm.
I'm more of a, quick and easy feedback first to get, you know, actionable information on how we're doing as we're building it. And then through that cycle, you find optimization. So that's philosophically where I land. But where,
Yeah, no, I
that's my,
love it. I love
yeah,
it. And, it's kind of funny if I used to be a software engineer a million years
yeah,
ago.
right.
and waterfall methodology was the way to do it. And then Agile came out. And what we're talking about very much has a corollary between, waterfall and Agile. I'm
Okay.
100% with you. I mean, I almost think that there's kind of the way you build a cyber program in stages. You almost do your metrics in stages as well. Like to me, there's like some
Mhm.
obvious early metrics to get, and then the more advanced, like when you start getting trend data and how quickly you can get intel from different places and stuff like that. So I do think it's interesting. What I'm kind of curious. What metric have you found to be the most um, valuable from the perspective of board engagement or board or budget? Like like from a professional perspective, we could talk about like dwell time and mean time and response, all this cool stuff.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
what gets the money flowing, right? I have a little button for that.
Straight cash, homie.
Straight Randy Moss, straight cash, homie. What
There
gets
you
the
go.
money flowing?
Yeah. Oh, so those are a lot of questions. I'll tell you. So let me help you with the. I'll show you my point of view because I've had a
Yeah,
quick answer for the first one, but the boards and actionable information for the CISO level, actionable information at the technical
yeah.
level,
Sorry,
and then
Ryan. Sorry.
no, it's
Yeah,
great. It's
yeah.
perfect because this is it, Jerry. You nailed it. Like this is why it's a challenge because what happens is there's strategic measures that say, all right, as a big program, right? How are we doing from a risk standpoint, right? What are the actual risks? What are the 5 to 7 strategic measures that that collectively tell the whole risk story, right? So you have one that tells a part of the story. Think of it like a pie, right? The whole story looks like this, and we have 5 to 7 that tell a piece of the pie individually, but collectively tell the whole, right? Then you get into all right, what are the and this is the question we always fall on. Where are the tactical measures? Like what
Mhm.
tactical measures do I need to know? This is the dwell time, right? The ability to identify an issue and then very quickly be able to, have a resolution or at least have an actionable team on it, right? And all these sort of mean time to do X in between. Um, and then there's the money question, right?
Mhm.
Then this is the tussle for the CISOs, right? It's like, all right, what are the ones that talk up to me about the risk where I can go to the board? What are the ones that sort of tell the story as I want to tell it, the way I see it, right? So that I can get the programs and the either the tooling or the people, like some sort of resource, right? That we have, cash being the resource,
Mhm.
that will have a need to fill this. And then, like, how do I know I sit back and have risk? And those are like all of the questions you asked are sort of packed into this. Like, how do I identify 5 to 7 key measures that then, can be supported by tactical measures that tell us, like, really what's going on, that actually tell the whole story. And then from there, what audience do we want to choose from? So if it's the money slide, well, the best is any one of the dwell times because that's where the risk is,
Mhm.
right? So if you're really looking to if you sit back and look at your program and you're like, all right, we're really fairly light on the ability to detect and respond in a rapid fashion, right? Which means there's an incident of some sort, be it sophisticated or not, right? Which has put some part of the organization or data at risk, right? To then say, all right, well, how much is it risk and how long is it risk and where has it gone to? So you either have, it's either through an endpoint, you've got endpoint detection, you can tell what's actually lost, or you don't, right? So anywhere in there, you choose a measure that says, all right, well, what part of the program do I need that's going to help me tell the story that's going to give me visibility into that type of an issue quicker? And then
Mhm.
how do I tell that story to the rest of the executive team or the board to then get funding for it? And that's the money slide. And that could be anything from, I mean, my favorite, just to answer the question in that context, is percentage of assets identified as critical.
Mhm.
The one thing everybody hates, right? But the reality is, it gets the board thinking about, well, why is that even important? Well, okay, of all of the assets that we have, right? I mean, choose from the cyber defense matrix, right? Not just data, right? But networks, users, and applications, right? Of all of those assets, do we have a visibility of those? And do we know which ones are critical? And every organization will try to say yes, but none of them actually do it well. So, as a manager of this, right? You want to say, well, I've got to have visibility of what's most important because that's what's going to impact the business. So I'll choose a measure from there. Percentage of assets identified as critical is a good starting point. Not glamorous, but it tells a
No, no,
practical
no.
story.
It is interesting. And let me just like for my own edification, if you can
Yeah.
clarify, when you say percent of identified assets that are critical, are you saying that percentage of total assets and this percentage is critical? Or are you saying we've identified all the critical assets, but we only see 25% of them? We don't know where the other 75% are. Which one are you saying?
Jerry, that's perfect. So the first one, but it
Okay.
informs, but the latter
Yeah.
is informed by the first one. And this is the good thing about a really good measure, right? I mean, it doesn't even have to be a metric per se. It can just be straight math.
Mhm.
Denominator, number of assets. Do we know it? The answer in most organizations is no. Okay, great. But at least now we're focused on the right problem, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
it's a
okay, we don't
range.
have precisely, right? Now go to the board and try to explain that. Wait, what do you mean you don't have all your assets inventoried, right? Or understood, or understood at least in a repository where you can at least identify where they are, and then try to have them all under management. No organization does that well, but it's the super fine point of where we start with this problem. Because if we don't know what we own, right, and we don't know where it is, which in the days of cloud infrastructure now is like a pretty big thing,
Yeah.
we have all these magical backdoors into our network. So it doesn't really matter how well we're doing on all the other things when we've got two open doors back here that are going to, that somebody somewhere has swiped a credit card, pushed a, you know, either a blob or a bucket or some sort of cloud instance in the infrastructure somewhere without logging or monitoring or identifying what's in it. And all of a sudden if you put anything of value to the attacker side and that could damage the organization, you now have this risk sitting out there in an asset class, that you don't have any visibility. And so it's sort of like all right, well, and God forbid you market as public, right? And all of a sudden now it's really exposed.
Yeah, yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Right. But this is the challenge. It's like, all right, well, do we know everything we own, and do we have it under management? And that's why something like, a simple measure with a denominator of all of them, right? With, okay, of all those, how much do we think are critical based on some risk factor that, we can argue about all day long? Then we can say, all right, of that, how many of our critical assets do we think we know? And this is where it starts to inform the, all right, well, the aspiration is to identify all assets and to identify all the ones that are critical, right? Clearly, that's easy to say, extremely hard to do. So what I've seen organizations do that has worked really well is to
Mhm.
say, all right, in 2 years, Jerry, like, we should have an understanding of all of our assets. Can hear people laughing already, right?
Yeah, yeah, right.
And then you understand the challenge here, and this is just one area, but the other challenge is, all right, of those, what do we really think is critical? And you don't have to have this like huge dynamic, multifaceted, risk analysis for every asset. You just have to get an ability to categorically say, is it going to put the organization at harm, and what type of harm will it be, and how do we rack and stack those, right? And then you can get to a point to say, all right, now how do we get to our 2-year goal? And that's just one measure, but that's where that first part informs the second part.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
funny. It's funny because like people who aren't in the know that are watching this right now might think like it just seems silly to say like in 2 years we'll know where all our assets are when like you could walk around your house and in a month, or I mean, and I'm being very very conservative, in a month you
Mm.
could inventory every item in your house. But with large organizations, I assume you're talking about large organizations, really. With large organizations and cloud and Carl putting their own shadow IT. Although I heard someone call it
Mhm.
unmanaged infrastructure the other day, which I loved because this
Yeah.
individual said shadow IT is a cool term for you and I, but like CFO doesn't know what shadow IT means. It just sounds like
Mhm.
a word that they don't care about. So unmanaged
Yeah.
infrastructure, we wanted to call it. So
That's
great
great.
point, Ryan. I love it. So getting back to the book, guys, right here is Ryan's book, Understand, Manage, and Measure Cyber Risk. The dude's got a million years of experience collectively. Ryan, one thing I noted here, and we don't
Yeah.
have to spend a ton of time on this, but well, first of all, let me just call out Michael McLaughlin because you made his day. Michael said he just started a position. He has to start a cyber program, and this live stream just happened. And your book is basically going to be his Uber cheat sheet. So nice job, Michael, and thanks for the assist, Ryan, on that.
Absolutely. And Michael, good luck. Like this is exactly what the book is written for, a practical guide to just step through the fundamentals that seem to be lost in the industry, right? So, I mean, the main thing here is This is why I actually wrote it as a guide for me to help organizations work through and just happen to publish it, right? And so, Michael, great. I really appreciate that, because it's really meant for the practitioner, like, how do I keep the thread the same, right? Do I know what problem I'm solving for? Do I know how to manage it? How do I know I'm doing well? Let's measure it. So thanks for that, Jerry and Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's Simply Cyber, Ryan. Like, our community is, we're all practitioners. We're all inclusive. So, anyways, the question I wanted to ask you: this is your first edition. Now, you have a second edition coming out June 25th. So, guys, if you're hot for that, just wait a month or so, and you can get the new edition. Here's my question for you, Ryan, and I mean it with all due respect, which usually means that I'm about to say something that's likely to offend you. Okay, so I've written a book. Okay, I've written 2 books, but like one was more of a commercial book, and I don't know if I could do it again. It is an arduous journey, and you wrote the same book twice. So, can you explain to me? Why did you do a second edition? What was your experience like? You don't have to spend a ton of time on that, because it's more about writing a book than cyber. And then 2, why did you write the book in the first place? So I know that's a bunch of questions, but I've given you some runway here.
Jerry, I love it. Yeah, I'll work them backwards if it's okay.
Yeah,
why did I write it? Honestly, so I left the DoD in, I think, 2014, went right to commercial. And it was, in the DoD, we have manuals. We have stuff that we're either writing manuals or policies, and we've got guidebooks everywhere. And if we don't, we write one. So I came out to industry, and I'm, briefing boards, lots of C-level executives, and they're really smart people, right? But there seemed to be this lack of the environment of where is sort of the go-to guide for how to sort of just start thinking about cybersecurity from a defensive standpoint in an organization. It didn't seem to exist. Now, trust me, Jerry, everybody listening, there's probably some other guide out there, and I just missed it because I really don't know that much about all this stuff. But I looked at this and said, all right, well, here's what I'm hearing from CISOs that they're challenged with. I need one common way to talk to the board, my other executives, the peers in my level, and my operators. And I need one framework, one way to think about this, right? And then I need a way to sort of see how I'm doing over time. And when I was looking for those things, honestly, Jerry, they didn't seem to exist. And so I actually wrote this as a guide for me to sort of have conversations with those and help them out, and maybe leave it as a leave behind. Well, then COVID happened, right? And it's all right, everything's sort of shut down. So I was actually with my mother-in-law's house and my family over COVID, and I just sat down on a vacation and just poured it all out into a bunch of pages, and it became a book. But yes, it is then you get it to the publisher, and it's wow, this is a real pain. And I don't recommend it for anybody, because that's for the real cycle. So as you know, that's the challenge. So that's why it was written. And then largely just as a field guide for CISOs to, hey, this is something that, might be helpful just getting started with the basics, full stop. And the second piece, look, once you push it out, you start to see the flaws in it, and you're all right, how does it connect to the overall enterprise risk management system, right? We've got SBOMs coming out, all right, we're big in the application space, and we really need visibility into some of the pieces that are there. So there are parts that sort of we put together, had some help with the second one, which was nice, which made it easier to your first question. But to literally pull some stuff together to say, all right, look, what are some of the pieces, as we get here that are sort of that are missing, we want to pull in. So we went deeper in the third-party risk, we went deeper in the controls to framework mapping, and we went deeper into the software bill of materials piece, because that's finally back in sort of mainstream, which got lost decades ago, and then how to push it into risk management. So that's what's new in the second one. And I'll tell you, Jerry, you're right. I don't think I'm ever going to write another, because it is, it's a lot of work. Yeah.
It really is. And like I said, with all due respect, I'm sure there was a good reason, but yeah, I can totally see where after you look at it, that you see all the flaws that no one else really is going to see, but I wish I had gone deeper in that, or I totally should have added that, or, whatever, like NIST CSF comes out with, the supply chain, and they're like, oh, this is a big area, I should probably incorporate that.
Yeah, do you mind if I tap into that for just a second? Because that's a really good point. So for all those listening, NIST is actually coming out with a new version, as we all know, and they're gonna put governance in as a third function, or I'm sorry, as a sixth function. Sorry, and that'll work. So, but it's an ever-changing field. So one of the key things for this sort of practitioner's guide was borrow from open source pieces. It's literally just a look at like, all right, here's a number of open source frameworks that are out there, right? Here's some measures that have worked over time that aren't like proprietary anywhere. And once you get that thread together, now the bigger pieces start to push out. And like, I'll tell you, Alex Esposito was a big help in actually writing some of the third-party risk and controls mapping part, because she was doing a lot of work in that space. And I was like, nobody seems to be taking sort of NIST where the controls stop and like say, ISO really has really good controls, and putting them together and say, all right, at least for right now, here's a connective tissue between the two to test your controls against what the risks really look like. But as you suggest, like, 7 months from now, that's going to be, there's always going to be a tweak. And so that's always a challenge too, because things are always changing.
Yeah, I was actually trying to find, I saw the NIST CSF 2.0. There's like somebody's made like a nice graphic with the governance. And one thing about that cyber framework is that for people, or that are interested, I think Bryson Board actually put this on social media. It's not like they're really introducing new controls per se. They're just actually carving out the governance ones from each of the 5 areas to have to basically call out the governance section, so the business people can be able to be like, oh, this is kind of your piece over here.
Yeah, that's right. And what's really interesting there is like, so all right, when we really step back, like what's the business we're really in, right? We're in the reduction of impact to the business, right?
Yeah, right.
And what's interesting is governance has picked up significantly over the last, let's call it 13, 15 years, something along those lines. So it makes sense to sort of call it out, because what happens is you have regulatory fines, right? It's the Fed is already there in certain areas. We see the SEC and other areas moving forward with this, right? But then also at the state level, right? You see what's happening with the New York Department of Financial Services. I'm out in California here. Like, California's got some interesting ones. And it's becoming a bigger impact to businesses, right? When they aren't aligned with what the regulators or the standards are required, because fines can be fairly hefty. We all know the GDPR math, right? Which is interesting, by the way. But for those doing work in Europe, right, and have to comply with GDPR, like if found, guilty is the wrong word, but if found at what's the word the lawyers love to use? But if found negligent in some way, right, and it's understood that it's negligent, then there's a certain percentage of your revenue that's at risk. Now, that's changed a little bit, and it's not as draconian as it sounds, but those are the fines that can really damage an organization. And so calling out governance in and of itself has that one-to-one relationship between the governance that you're supposed to be aligned to and the fine that you're going to pay, if you will, right, if you don't have what you're supposed to be having in the jurisdictions that you're operating in. So it makes a ton of sense to pull it out.
Yeah, and we'll see how that model works too. Australia passed similar legislation like maybe 4 months ago. If you suffer a data breach, you get fined some percentage of your annual revenue income. So I mean, that seems harsh, but money is a motivator, right?
Absolutely. So think about this. This is actually a great point on something that we struggle with or organizations struggle with all the time, and we have a hard time landing on. What do we mean by risk? Right? So there are multiple definitions out there, and most organizations don't really have a common thread of what risk looks like through, call it the CRO or the policy side from the risk side, all the way down to through cybersecurity and other risk models that don't include online security. And what's interesting is the ones that we typically gravitate to are the ones that very simply call out the impact to the business, right? What does it mean to the business? And half of the model is, well, what are your incident response costs? Should it go up, right? Fines and regulatory pieces are part of it. But one of the things that we typically don't think about, right, is legal fines. Like, how much is it going to cost in legal costs to determine, right, like what regulations we broke, interact with the regulators, determine what those fines look like, and pay the fines. And now all of a sudden, we've got that to worry about too. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm actually, well, two thoughts on that, Ryan. One, I'm actually kind of an advocate of, people are humans are very social creatures, and they talk, right? And like I talk to people in my circles, and you talk to people in your circles. But when CEOs suffer painful financial impact from like a ransomware attack or from a business email compromise or whatever, they're in the locker room at the country club talking about, I just got hit with this thing. And like, like if my buddy Carl is saying that he paid $2 million for XYZ, or that his insurance premiums have gone up 30x, that I'm going to listen to that. It matters. And I'm going to take it with me. And it's not something that happens overnight, but I feel like over the last, 3 to 5 years, there's been this like societal trend, and it's been in the news obviously, but I think that those conversations are happening among peers, and it's resonating, and it's got some stickiness to it.
Yeah, 100%. And the good news is, look, people do talk, and especially those with shared interest and shared responsibilities will typically like to talk to each other about like, hey, what did you do in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
And as human beings, that network is alive and well, and that's great. But oh my gosh, Jerry, like think about this. Now add ransomware to that piece, right?
Yeah.
Now that's really complicated for board members or executives just to think through, because in the economic sense, it's like, well, hang on, our stuff is all shut down. I can't access it, and somebody's giving me a dollar value to bring it all back, right? Like, do I do it without even understanding this, the cryptological components to it and whether or not they can actually decrypt it all, right?
Yeah.
But at that very basic economic level, it's like, okay, well, how much and what's the cost? But now it's wildly more complex, because now if the attribution, depending on what that decision is, let's say the decision's yes, right? It's going to make this point a little bit more pointed, if you will. Now all of a sudden, if that particular ransomware attack and the payment was made to decrypt it, and let's just say it did work, or whatever the case might be, and it gets out, I'm leaving that fuzziness just off to the side because we could go down that rabbit hole. But the challenge is that a sanctioned country or not? Because if it was, and the company paid the fine, now all of a sudden, paid the ransomware,
yeah,
your fine can be astronomical, and you have other consequences. So now we have that to worry about, when your systems are locked up, right? From some sort of, some clicks, you got
just another reason why ransomware is such a blight on our society.
It is, and it's unfortunate because like it was going down at some time because people weren't paying the ransom, and then all of a sudden some factors were involved and ransom payments went up, and so it was like, oh, this is a business. Like pirate ships off the coast of Somalia. It's like, oh, they'll pay. Well, then why don't we just go hit them? Well, that's a problem. I mean, heck, the Norwegians did it too. Outside of France, when like, hey, France won't pay us. France will pay us not to attack. Everybody show up and like surround the border of France. Like, simple economics.
You have to de-incentivize the action, right? Either through punishment or through lack of benefit. That's the only way to why would anyone stop? Like, it's cheap, it's easy, it's nearly not unattributable, but like you yourself aren't going to go to jail if you do it.
That's right.
You know what I mean? But so really quick, we got a couple questions from chat. Chat's been absorbing everything you've been dropping like a sponge. So the questions have been limited today, but I do want to bring them up. Ryan, Carrie wanted to know, I'm going to rephrase it a little bit. What's the value of knowing Linux in a kind of a GRC space?
Well, it depends on what operating systems your organization is running on. Right, context matters. So depending on what operating systems you need to use, right, for whatever piece. I mean, from a GRC standpoint, depends on where the risk is. Probably more R than G and C, right? So I think it's highly valuable if the organization is using it and it's not well understood.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are economic reasons for it too, right, for the business. But I think that was
Yeah,
I think that's
absolutely.
probably the best answer. Yeah, but yeah.
No problem.
So
and then,
it's always good to know solid OSs too, so that's helpful.
Yeah, well, I mean, Linux, Linux, you got to understand some tech so you can understand what the risks really are and if they apply to you, and if a network engineer is blowing smoke up your butt, or, or if you want to do some hunting on your own network. Devin wanted to know, and I haven't read this one. You may have answered this, but having thought through managing cyber risk for your book, where do you see opportunities for practitioners to learn and roles that new learning would fit into? So I guess, like, if with your book, how might you apply it and get experience in it if you're not like a CISO, basically? That's kind of how I'm interpreting this question.
Okay, perfect. Two thoughts there. One is, look, let's just put this in the context of the tech management divide is there. It's alive and well, and for good reason, right? We have the abstraction into management, right, and the actual delivery in engineering. I would say if you're in the engineering space, looking up into where, and Jerry, you nailed it with the incentives, looking up into where the business is incentivized, the organization, understanding that construct will help filter out a whole bunch of baloney in management that's not necessarily relevant. But what's relevant is, what does the business do? What would be at risk should they not be able to do that? And can I get a common language, right, in sort of risk, right, threat, vulnerability plus impact? Can I get that understanding of what the impact is to the business, so everything I say, right, from an engineering standpoint is immediately translated, or that translation is helpful into impact to the business so any manager can understand it. That would be one way to apply this going up. Going down, if you're in the management space and really sort of struggling on the engineering or even understanding cybersecurity space or information security, right? Looking at what the fundamental pieces of where is the information, or let's put it this way, where are the assets, right? Mm-hmm. How am I protecting those assets, right? And am I ready to respond, right? That, just offering that out to the engineering space, and it should wind you somewhere into the soccer sim or wherever you're actually getting your alerts and understanding, to then peel back in and say, all right, how do I make sense of this information in an organized way that I can then translate it for my peers and the executives up the line? So it's the top down meets bottoms up, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. And in the middle, they shall meet, right? Devin likes the concept of common language. I agree 100%. You definitely need to understand what people are saying. One more quick question, and then I'll give you the final opportunity to deliver your monologue, Ryan. I always love to give my guests the full stage so they can, whatever they want. Real quick though, Devin had a follow up. He said, "Have you seen cyber insurance shift the ways that risks are mitigated and basic controls are expected?" And what basic controls are expected from the insurance world? So, yeah, I guess what have you seen the impact the insurance world's had on cyber?
Sure, and cyber having on insurance, right? So, in the beginning, CISOs used to need to stack a whole bunch of insurance policies just to have coverage, right? And Jerry, I think you know this really well. So insurance, because there was no breach data and we couldn't run algorithms on it or actuarial science on, like, okay, what actually has happened. So insurance has learned a lot by what's actually important. How that has impacted organizations is literally really sort of two pieces. One, in the legal world, right, in our contracts, trying to identify where our critical assets are, and this sort of pushes into third-party risk management, getting our legal and our contract structure in place to say, do we know what we really have at risk, right? And do those that are accessing it know they have at risk? Can we push it through the contract side? And insurers looking at that can say, all right, at least there's a through line between where the risk is and who may own it, which is really hard, right? We see the federal government sort of pushing into this line of responsibility, right? And legal responsibility. And that's where the insurance is going to pick up, because they'll need to know, depending on who's proverbially stuck with the bag at the end of the day, that's going to trick over the insurance side of the house. So yeah, they're learning from each other, and that's probably the way I would answer that question.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Ryan, my youngest son does have soccer practice, so we do 45 minutes for at least 6 weeks of Thursdays. But I love giving my guests an opportunity to take the stage and say what they want. We didn't get into the McKinsey stuff, so I would love to have you on the show again. We can talk more. Offline, whatever. But let me give you the stage, Ryan. The floor is yours. Whatever you'd like to say, you can pump your book. You can talk down on RSA, your choice. But the floor is yours, Ryan.
Perfect. Jerry, thanks. All right, I'll pull it all together. Here it is. So here at RSA, right? I think probably the best talk that I saw here was Kevin Mandia's talk, right, about some of the breaches. He went through some of the Apex breaches and what he's seen in the year of 2022. From the executive standpoint, one of his comments was what CISOs worry about, in his opinion, was having a common framework, a way to understand throughout the business how I categorize all the pieces I have to bring together. That is the exact reason why this book was actually written and published, right? If you're struggling to understand cybersecurity in any way, either as a manager or as an engineer or somebody who's interested in getting into the career field, right? There are not a lot of guidances out there or guidebooks out there to practically walk through the problem we're trying to solve for. How do we get it contained so we can manage it? And how do we know we're doing well by measures? And, understand, manage, and measure is a useful tool in that mechanism. It's probably all I would say.
Perfect.
Makes a great gift too.
It does make a great gift. I'll tell you what, I will be purchasing first edition, Ryan. I can't, I'm impulsive, right? So now I want it. If I bookmark it for stage 2 or second revision, I might forget, and I do want it in my bookshelf. It looks like a great book just by the layout. I love it. I'll be giving my subjective and unbiased opinion of it after I rip through it. So you may not want to come back on, but I'm sure it's going to be a very positive review. Thank you so much, Ryan, for coming on. Enjoy the rest of RSA. Genuinely appreciate your time, your expertise, sharing it with the Simply Cyber community. A lot of great comments in here. People saying incredible talk, great insights. You're helping Michael crush it on day one at his new job. So genuinely, sincerely appreciate all that you did. Thanks so much, Ryan.
Jerry, thanks so much for doing this. You're doing great with everybody. And thanks for everybody for joining. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, let's slide you over to the green room really quick. All right, guys, I hope you got incredible value out of Ryan's talk. I know it was a short one, but man, that thing was crammed full of juicy tidbits and information. I did pin a link to his book on Amazon in the chat. So if you want to just make it easy and grab it, go for it there. I will be getting it myself when I get back from soccer practice. If you don't know, you can join us tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, just like every weekday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern time for a daily cyber threat briefing. It's a 1-hour top cybersecurity news stories of the day. It's a live briefing. I don't see the stories beforehand, and I go through them with you, and I provide my analysis, my expertise on how you can operationalize it or what you can do to help you get a job in the cyber industry. And we do it every single weekday morning at 8 a.m. So come join us tomorrow, simplycyber.io/streams. I'm Jerry. This has been Simply Cyber. Thanks so much, and until next time, stay secure.